Help in Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Welcome students for my economics class. I am Anselmo Fernandes, teacher from Guardian Angel High Secondary, Kursore. Well students, the first unit of the economics syllabus is Introduction and Consumers' Behavior. Now my today's topic to my class is Consumers' Behavior. Now before I could go for my topic, let me just give you the learning outcomes of my lesson. Now after studying this lesson, we'll identify the major influences in consumers' behavior. We'll distinguish between different consumer behaviors, influences, and their relationship. We'll establish the relevance of consumer behavior theories and concepts. Now, before I could go to the topic, let me just introduce who is a consumer. Now, consumer is a person or persons who satisfies his wants by purchasing goods and services. Now, when he purchases goods and services, he follows a certain psychological pattern to buy the commodities, what we call it as behavior. So we are going to study consumer behavior in this topic. Now, first thing that you have to know is consumer's equilibrium. Now, equilibrium means here the consumer acquires the maximum satisfaction. Now, to achieve maximum satisfaction, it will depend upon two factors, that is, price of the good and the income of the consumer. Now, when the income and the price of the commodity will determine the satisfaction of the consumer. So, the consumer plans his expenditure in such a way that he maximizes his satisfaction. What we call it is consumer's equilibrium. Now, the first concept that we need to know is utility. Now, what is utility? Utility means it is the want-satisfying power of a commodity. When you consume that commodity, it satisfies your want. Now, that power, it is called as utility. For example, I am hungry. Now, to satisfy my hunger, I am consuming a samosa. Now, when I eat that samosa, my hunger is satisfied. That means a samosa has got the capacity to satisfy my hunger. That is what we call it as utility. Secondly, another example that I can give you. We know that tobacco, drugs, they are injurious for health. But still, these items satisfy the wants of a person who are addicted to that. That means utility does not follow ethics. Okay? So in short, you need to know that utility has got the power to satisfy human wants. Now, measurement of utility. There are two methods or two measurements to measure utility. The first method is cardinal measurement of utility, and the second one is ordinal measurement of utility. Now, cardinal measurement of utility. In that approach, we measure utility or the satisfaction that the person achieves in terms of numbers, or satisfaction is expressed numerically. Coming to ordinal measurement. Now here you don't use the numbers, but your satisfaction is measured in terms of preferences or the order of your preferences. Like, I like this first, I prefer this first, second thing, second preference, third preference, and so on. So in case of cardinal utility, it is numerically expressed or in countable numbers. Coming to ordinal, we measure satisfaction according to the preferences. For example, pizza. Now by consuming pizza, it gives me 60 utils. Utils means unit for measurement of utility. So by consuming pizza, it gives me satisfaction of 60 utils. Whereas by consuming a burger, it gives me 40 utils of satisfaction. This we measured in case of cardinal utility. When we measure satisfaction ordinally or ordinal measurement, I will say that my first preference is pizza and my second preference is burger. Okay? So here, ordinal measurement, we measure in order of the preferences. So my first preference, second preference, third preference, and so on. Now, cardinal measurement was used by Professor Alfred Marshall, whereas coming to ordinal measurement, it is used by John Hicks. Let us understand cardinal utility analysis. Now, this approach was given by Professor Alfred Marshall in his book, Principles of Economics. Now, concepts of utility. The first concept that we need to know is total utility. Now, total utility means it is the sum total of utility derived from the consumption of all units of a commodity. Say, for example, I have half a dozen of apples. I eat one apple. It gives me some level of satisfaction. I eat another apple, second apple, gives me more satisfaction. As and when I finish all the units of the apples, it will give me total satisfaction. Now here one thing you need to take note of. When you eat the apples that I have taken, say like in an example, I have taken 6 apples. Now as I finish all the apples, or before I could finish eating all the apples, a sort of psychological experience or psychological effect, what we call it as, I will feel a dislike for the commodity. Since I am eating them continuously, there is a tendency that I develop a dislike for that commodity. And because of that, total utility starts declining. Let us take an example to understand this concept. When I eat the first apple, I get 8 util satisfaction. When I eat the second one, I get 14. When I eat the third, it is 18. Okay? And it goes on till when it reaches to 5th apple, it is 20. So the consumer has reached to the maximum level. When I consume the 6th apple, it will start declining. When you plot these points in a form of a graph, you are going to get a rising starts falling. Now, the psychological effect or the behavior that I told you here is, as in when you continuously keep on eating, here you develop a dislike for that commodity and then it starts declining. Now, coming to marginal utility. Now, marginal utility means addition made to the total utility. Now, marginal utility is a derived concept. It is derived from the total utility. So, in short, it is the addition made to the total utility. Now, let us see how marginal utility is calculated. Units consumed, total utility, marginal utility. Now, I consume first unit of the commodity. I get satisfaction of 8 utils. 8 minus 0, it is 8. I eat another apple. I get 14. So, 14 minus 8, marginal utility is 6. Third apple, 18. 18 minus 14, it gives me 4. So, 20 minus 18, I am getting 2. When I consume the fifth apple, again the same level of satisfaction. So, it is the maximum. So, 20 minus 20, I am getting 0. When I consume the sixth apple, I am getting a declining util. 18 minus 20 will give me minus 2. So, marginal utility goes on diminishing. So, let us see to plot the marginal utility graph. On the x-axis, we measure units. On the y-axis, we measure utility. Now, since we are discussing about marginal utility, I have written marginal utility over here. And this is the marginal utility curve that I get after plotting the values. Now, let us see the relationship between total utility and marginal utility. Now, here you need to take note. The first thing that you should know about total utility and marginal utility. As the total utility goes on increasing, marginal utility is positive. When total utility reaches to maximum point or maximum level, marginal utility becomes 0. And when total utility starts declining, marginal utility becomes negative. So, here you need to know 3 important things, that first, when total utility increases, marginal utility is positive. When total utility is maximum, marginal utility becomes 0. And when total utility starts declining, marginal utility becomes negative. Now, one of the important part of this theory is the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, for the board exams, many a time this question is asked, and there are 5 parts to this law: statement, assumptions, schedule, diagram, and explanation of the graph. Each part carries one mark, say like statement 1 mark, assumptions 1 mark, schedule 1 mark, diagram 1 mark, explanation of the diagram or the graph 1 mark. Okay? So, let us go to understand the law. Now, the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, as I told you earlier, as and when we keep on consuming a commodity, okay, marginal utility goes on diminishing. I repeat, as the consumer consumes all the units of a commodity, marginal utility goes on declining. Now, assumptions of this law. There are two basic assumptions to this law. Now, what are assumptions? Now, assumptions means these are the statements used to support a theory. Now, in case of law of diminishing marginal utility, there are two main assumptions. The first assumption, only standard units of a commodity are consumed, like a cup of tea and not a spoon. To experience this law, to experience this behavior, you need to take sizable quantity of a commodity. Now, if you take a cup of tea, then you will experience that. If you take a spoon of tea, then you will not experience that effect. Another example that I can give, apple. If I eat one full apple, it will give me that experience. If I eat a piece of it, then I will not get that feeling. Okay? So, only standard units of a commodity are consumed. Second assumption, consumption of a commodity is continuous and not that one unit is consumed today and the other on some other day. Now, when you consume the commodity, it should be succession. So, I'm eating one apple today and the next one in next week and third in the third week. I am not going to experience that effect. When I explained you about the total utility, I told you that as and when we keep on consuming the commodity, after a certain period of time, you feel a dislike for that commodity and your utility goes on declining. So here, if your consumption is not continuous, then you will not experience that effect. Now, schedule, it is a tabular presentation. Units consumed. First, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Total utility that I have got, 8, 14, 18, 20, 20, 18. Marginal utility, 8 minus 0, 8. 14 minus 8, 6, and so on. Now, on the examination point of view, you need not include total utility in your schedule. Just units consumed and marginal utility. Now, here also I have shown the calculation for your simplicity. No need of doing the calculation, you can directly calculate by yourself and write the values in the marginal utility column. Now, using this schedule, we can draw the diagram. On the x-axis, we measure units consumed. On the y-axis, we measure marginal utility. And this is a downward sloping marginal utility curve. Now, in the examination, no need of plotting. You can draw a neat freehand drawing of marginal utility. Is it clear? So, there is no need of plotting, taking the scale and measuring. You can draw a freehand drawing and draw the diagram. Now, explanation of the diagram. the graph shows that marginal utility goes on diminishing with the increase in consumption. So, as you increase your consumption, marginal utility goes on diminishing. With the consumption of the fifth unit, marginal utility becomes 0. This is with reference to the schedule that I have taken. So, when consumption of the fifth unit, marginal utility becomes 0. With the consumption of the sixth unit, marginal utility becomes negative. So, this is the first part of the utility analysis, okay, wherein we learn about the diminishing marginal utility. Now, let us go for the ordinal measurement of utility. Now, ordinal measurement of utility is called as indifference curve analysis. Now, this theory was given by Professor John Hicks. According to him, utility can be best be compared depending upon one's taste and preferences. So, he is of the argument or in favor that utility can best be measured with the order of the preferences of a consumers. So, it depends on the preferences of the consumer, and that will give him the utility. Comparison of utility is called as ordinal measurement of utility. When you do the comparison of utility, it is called as the ordinal measurement of utility. For example, a cup of tea gives me more satisfaction than a cup of coffee. So now that is my preference. Cup of tea gives me more satisfaction as compared to coffee. Now there will be other people who will prefer coffee than to tea. So in short, it depends upon the preferences of a person. Now, indifferent set. It is a set of those combinations of two goods which offer the consumer the same level of satisfaction, so that the consumer is indifferent across any number of combinations in his indifference. So, it is a set of two goods which gives the consumer same level of satisfaction. For example, the example that I have taken here, apples and oranges. Now, combination A, it gives, I buy one apple and 10 oranges. It gives me satisfaction. In combination B, I increase my consumption of apples and decrease the consumption of oranges. Both combination B, 2 apples and 8 oranges gives me same level of satisfaction. Combination C, 3 apples and 6 oranges gives me same level of satisfaction. Combination D, 4 apples, 4 oranges. So whichever the combination that is there, whether A, B, C or D, it gives me same level of satisfaction. Indifference schedule. Schedule means a table. Now, coming to indifference schedule, it is a table showing the combination of two goods. That is, here I have taken the example of apples and oranges. These are the combinations A, B, C, D, and all the combinations, whether it is A, B, C or D, they give me the same level of satisfaction. Now, indifference curve. The representation of indifference schedule, it is called as indifference curve. Now, whatever the combinations that are lying on the indifference curve, it gives the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. On the x-axis, I measure commodity 1, here in the example I've taken apples. On the y-axis, I've taken oranges as commodity 2. Now here to draw this, I didn't take the example, I've drawn an imaginary one without scale. Bundle A or combination A, bundle B or combination 2, combination C, combination D. Join all the points and you are going to get a downward sloping indifference curve, IC, indifference curve. Now any point lying on this curve gives same level of satisfaction to the consumer, whether at point A or point B or point C or point D. All this combination gives same level of satisfaction to the consumer. And because of that, it is called an indifference curve. The consumer is indifferent towards all the combinations that he has consumed. Now, indifference map. A family of indifference curves, it is called as indifference map. A collection of indifference curves is called as an indifference map. IC1. Now, any point lying on this, as I explained to you earlier, gives the consumer same level of satisfaction, whether it is here or here or here. I have drawn another indifference curve, IC2. Now, here, all the points that lie on this indifference curve gives the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. Now, here one thing you need to take note. Higher is the indifference curve, higher is the satisfaction acquired by a consumer. In short, a consumer prefers a higher indifference curve. So, in this case, consumer will prefer IC2 to IC1. Let us take another indifference curve, IC3. Now, IC3 will give more satisfaction to the consumer as compared to IC2 and IC1. Clear? So, in short, a family of indifference curve, it is called as indifference map. A consumer prefers higher indifference curve to a lower indifference curve. So, naturally, in this diagram, consumer will prefer IC3. Now, next topic that I am going to take up is consumer's budget. Consumer's budget. It is assumed that consumer has limited income, and the choice of the commodity of two goods to be consumed depends upon the income and the price level. Considering a consumer is having limited income, now the choice of his goods will depend upon the income of the consumer and the price of the commodity. So, here the consumer will try to balance between the income and the price of the commodity. Budget set. It refers to attainable combination of a set of two commodities with the given prices of the commodity and the income of the prices. Now, with the given price and with the given income of the consumer, a consumer buys two commodities. Now, example of a budget set. Now, here I have taken one example. Consumer's income is 100 rupees, price of apples 10 and price of oranges 5. In consumer's income is 100, price of apples is 10, price of oranges is 5. Now here we need to make a budget set with the prices of the two goods and the income of the consumer. Apples, oranges, apples costing 10 rupees, oranges 5 rupees. M represents income of the consumer, and here I am going to write down the values of the budget set. I am buying only oranges, so no apples, so it will give 0. I am buying 20 oranges costing 5 rupees each, so 20 into 5 will give 100. Your income is 100, so budget set is 0 and 20. 0 and 20. I buy one apple costing 10 rupees, so it gives me 10. I reduce the purchase of oranges from 20 to 18, cost is 5, so it gives me 90. Income is 100, so 1 apple and 18 oranges. Two apples, cost is 10, will give you 20 rupees. 16 oranges, cost is 5, will give 80. So 20 plus 80 will give 100. So budget set is 2 and 16. 3 apples, 10 oranges will give 30 rupees. 14 oranges, cost is 5, it will give 70. So 70 plus 30 will give 100. Your budget set is 3 and 14. 4 apples, cost is 10, 40 rupees. 12 oranges, cost is 5, so 12 into 5 will give you 60. 60 plus 40 will give you 100. Your budget set is 4 and 12. So I have completed this full and the budget, this is your given budget set. Now here you need to take note of. Now the combinations that I have given here, your full income or your full amount is utilized in purchasing both the goods, apples and oranges. Now there will be more also which will be less than 100 rupees. These combinations, they are equal to 100 rupees. Now construction of budget set. Now let us learn here how to construct a budget line. Consumer's income is 100 rupees, price of apples is 10 and price of oranges is 5. Now here you need to do a little calculation. Number of units divided by the income of the consumer divided by the price of the commodity. As per the problem that I have given, M is the income, that is 100. Price of apples is 10, price of oranges is 5. Now, using this formula, income upon price of the commodity, I am calculating how many units of a commodity I am purchasing. So 100 rupees is my income, price of apples is 10. So 100 divided by 10, it gives you 10. Oranges, income upon price of the commodity. So income is 100 rupees divided by the price of oranges is 5. So 100 divided by 5, it gives you 20. Now let us go to draw the diagram. On the x-axis, we measure apples, commodity 1. On the y-axis, I measure commodity 2. In the example, I have taken oranges. Okay? So taking the values of calculation. Now, in case of apples, I got the value as 10. In case of oranges, I got 20. So, taking 1 centimeter as 2 units, I have taken the scale and see that you all cover up, see that the value is included in on the axis. For oranges, it has become 20. So, I have plotted on the y-axis. Now, join both the points 20 and 10. So, this is the budget line that we got by using this example. And the function of the budget line is m is equal to P1 multiplied by x1 plus P2 multiplied by x2. Now, M means consumer's income, P1 means price of commodity 1, x1 means number of units of commodity 1, P2 means price of commodity 2, and x2 means number of units of commodity 2. Now, attainable and non-attainable combinations from the budget line. Now, this is the example which I have referred to the earlier slide. Same income I have taken, M is equal to 100, apples rupees 10, oranges rupees 5. And with that, I have drawn the budget line. Now, point A. This point is lying on the budget line. Now, it indicates that the full amount or the income of the consumer is utilized. As per the graph, the consumer buys 6 apples. So, the cost of 6 apples, it will be 60 rupees, 6 into 10. And he buys 8 oranges costing 5 rupees each, which will give 40 rupees. So, 60 and 40, 100 rupees. So, the full amount or the income is utilized by the consumer. So, budget line indicates all those combinations which are equal to the income, and it is called as attainable combinations. Now, there are other attainable combinations which are lying below the budget line. The difference between the combinations that are lying on the budget line, it is equal to 100 rupees, and any combination which is lying below the budget line, it indicates that income is not fully utilized. After purchasing both the commodities, some amount is remaining in the hands of the consumer. Whereas point lying on the budget line, full income is utilized. Point C. In this, the consumer is buying 8 apples costing 10 rupees each. So, 8 into 10 will give you 80 rupees. Similarly, he is buying 12 oranges costing rupees 5. So, the total amounts to 60 rupees. So, 60 plus 80 will give you 140. Income of the consumer is 100. Is that clear? 40 rupees are in excess, which the consumer doesn't have. So, this is an unattainable combination. Now, calculation of consumer's income. Many a time a question is being asked on calculation of the income of a consumer. Now, the formula to calculate the income of the consumer, M is equal to P1 into P2 plus P2 into X2. M is the income of the consumer. P1 is the price of the commodity 1. X1 is the quantity of the commodity X1. P2, price of commodity 2. X2, quantity of commodity 2. Now, let us use this formula to solve one problem. The problem is, a consumer can afford to buy 8 apples costing rupees 10 each and 5 mangoes costing rupees 20 each. If the consumer spends his entire income to buy both the fruits, calculate the income of the consumer. Here, the consumer is buying 8 apples, 10 rupees for each apple. He buys mangoes, 5 mangoes, and the cost of each mango is 20 rupees. Now, I want to find out the income of the consumer. So, we are going to take the formula M is equal to P1 X1 plus P2 X2. So, when you solve this problem, first in the rough column, arrange the data. M means income of the consumer, which you need to find out. Price of apples, it is P1, that is 10 rupees. Number of apples, that is X1, is 8. Price of mangoes is P2, that is 20. Number of mangoes, X1, that is 5. Let us substitute these values in the formula. So, P1 is 10 multiplied by X1 is 8 plus P2 is 20, X2 is 5. So, 10 into 8 will give us 80, 20 into 5 will give us 100. So, 8 into 10 is equal to 80. 20 into 5 is 100. 80 plus 100, it is 180. Therefore, the income of the consumer is 180. Now, monotonic preferences. Monotonic preferences mean a consumer's preferences are monotonic if between any two combinations he prefers a combination which has more, at least one of the goods and no less of the other goods. For example, I have taken bundle A as there are 2 Cadburys and 2 burgers. I got bundle B, there are 3 Cadburys and 2 burgers. So, naturally, a rational consumer will take or choose the second bundle because there are 3 Cadburys and 2 burgers. As compared to the first one, there are more of at least one of the commodity. Therefore, bundle B is the monotonic preference of the consumer. Now, consumer's equilibrium using indifference curve analysis. Now, here we are going to learn about the consumer's equilibrium, where the consumer is getting more satisfaction or the maximum satisfaction with the use of indifference curve and budget line. Let us draw the diagram first. On the x-axis, I measure apples. On the y-axis, I measure oranges. These are the 2 commodities which a consumer prefers or wants to buy. Indifference curve 1 or IC1, as explained to you earlier. The points lying on the indifference curve indicates the same level of satisfaction which a consumer acquires. Might be over here, or over here. So, all the points lying on the indifference curve give same level of satisfaction to the consumer. Let us draw another indifference curve IC2. Again here, the combinations that are lying on indifference curve 2 give the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. Now the difference here, a rational consumer will always prefer indifference curve 2. Higher the, as I explained to you earlier, higher is the indifference curve, higher is the satisfaction a consumer derives. So naturally, a consumer will prefer IC2 to IC1. This is the budget line. Now, when the budget line is in tangent to the indifference curve, that point is the consumer's equilibrium. Now, there are various combinations of this indifference curve, but the consumer is in equilibrium or gets the maximum satisfaction at point A. Let us take third indifference curve, IC3. Now, as I explained to you, IC3 gives more satisfaction to the consumer as compared to IC2. But here the problem is, these are unattainable combinations. Why? Because the budget constraint is lying here. The budget line is here and it is tangent with the indifference curve 2. Here the consumer is not in a position to buy these combinations. No doubt it gives high satisfaction to the consumer. These combinations are not possible or non-attainable to the consumer. So, where the indifference curve is in tangent or touches the indifference curve, that is the point where the consumer is satisfied maximum or consumer gets the maximum satisfaction, or what we call it as optimal choice of a consumer. In the diagram, the point A is the optimal choice of the consumer. So students, we have seen how a consumer behaves in a rational way. Thank you. God bless you.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.
अब आपकी सुरक्षा आपके हाथों में। ल्यूपी सेफ हैंड सैनिटाइजर, आपका और चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स का फर्स्ट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस। अब आपकी सुरक्षा आपके हाथों में। ल्यूपी सेफ हैंड सैनिटाइजर, आपका और चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स का फर्स्ट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस। अब आपकी सुरक्षा आपके हाथों में। ल्यूपी सेफ हैंड सैनिटाइजर, आपका और चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स का फर्स्ट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस।